Working on it.
Look at us. We have a countdown and everything. Whoop, whoop.
So
Happy Friday,
cool.
Christy. Happy Friday, KP.
Hello.
Hey
guys.
Happy Friday. Just so you know, for my KP Talks dollars and cents, I went to like Fiverr or something like that. And I had you get to pick, I had like a British female voice. And she's like, now it's KP Talks dollars and cents. So we could totally spice that thing up.
I'm going to have my daughter work on it. We'll get it. It'll be nice. It'll be nice and spicy. Look at the sun shining on my face. It's like this aura of me. Hey guys, happy Friday. Last word presented by Chrisman Commentary. Today's episode is sponsored by nobody. But imagine if your logo was there next week and the week after. If you guys are interested in putting your logo on our little podcast and getting in front of hundreds of people each week, hit us up, hit Christy up, KP or myself, and we'll put you in contact with the business people. That would be Rob and Robbie Chrisman, but it's Friday and it's time for the last word. Let's hit it. So,
I just need to know what you're going to do with all that sunshine. Like, do you have big plans? Are you going to get outside, do something like?
No, because it's 22 degrees, and so it's still damn cold.
So you'll be like a cat enjoying it from in the window.
It's just what I'm doing. Yeah, except I'll leave it at that. I was going to say something that cats do, but I'm not even going to go there. So, as usual, lots of stuff happening this week. Maybe not as much in the industry, but sure is a lot going on outside that I think has indirect and / direct impact on us all. But before we kick into any specific topics, what are you guys up to this week? What's been happening in your world? Christy, let's start with you.
Well, the weather has not been as amazing here. We have no sun, but it is in the 70s. So I'll give it that. This week has been really, as we think about the fact that we are now a 1 in 11, not a 0-12 from a forecast standpoint, right? We've got some actual numbers to look at. They came across the finish line. I feel like we're in one of those, like we just squeaked across making the goals that we had for January. I feel like that's a good way to start off the year. But we did some reflection on that. And some thoughts about, it's never comfortable to just squeak under. You want to do better, and you want to reach your stretch goals. And this is a good time to really sit down and look at, is the market where you think it's going to be, right? We've seen revisions over the last few months from our favorite economists about what they think is going to happen. We've seen some of the reality of how the markets are reacting to the current administration. So it's a good time to just take a look at your plan and see if you need to make any early pivots to actually achieving your goals for the year. So that's what we did this week. It's a worthwhile experience.
So shout out Team FinLocker. We had our best month as a business in January, which was awesome. And, we didn't blow out the number, but we hit and exceeded our pro forma for January. And I look at it as a good signal for others, especially lenders, because our product's really something that a modern originator, right, a modern lender, a modern originator, someone with a long horizon, who plays the long game, kind of utilizes. And for us to have our best month in terms of adding loan officers and having loan officers adopt, I think it's just a real good early signal as the year kicks in.
Yeah, obviously, we're huge fans of FinLocker over here, and I love it. You guys are pushing it. We had our sales rallies. We do it once a year. It's typically right around this time. So I know a lot of companies have like their, kickoffs or sales rallies or whatever they call it. And So our retail channel, we actually did 2 coasts. We had a stage in South Florida and a stage in our corporate office in Corona. And then yesterday was the TPO channels, which was just in Corona. And then, of course, anyone that can't make it to either of the venues are on Zoom. So I'll just kind of broaden this out. The vibe is great. I mean, just like, all of us when we were coming out of Austin for the IMB, the MBA, I think the vibe is good. There's a lot of things to be thankful for in our business. We're very blessed. Health, house, all the things you take for granted until they're threatened or challenged. But it's also nice to have, trending lower rates, right? So we've seen the 10-year Treasury, which is now an absolute focus by this administration, literally saying we are targeting the 10-year Treasury, which is what has the highest correlation to our mortgage interest rates. To go from 480 down to, touch around 440 yesterday, I know it's kind of bouncing around in a range, and I'm certainly not spiking any footballs or claiming any victories, but just you get these little incremental wins and you just get this like slowly trending improvement in rates. And that's huge. I mean, we had a humongous lock day yesterday and again today. It's only 10 a.m. out here, and it's directly correlated to, the quarterly refunding announcement by the Treasury Secretary that is new, and it's his first announcement. And when they say, yeah, hey, bond market, we're not going to make you swallow a ton more treasuries. And, we think, keeping the yield curve kind of like on the shorter end of it, because we think when they come due in, a year, 2 years, or 5 years, or 7 or 10 or whatever, we think the rates, and the yields will be lower when they have to refund the next time around. And I mean, you saw like an instant reaction in the bond market and in a positive manner. And so I'll just say what I'm saying. So Neil Kashkari is on the Fed Board of Governors and I believe a voting member now. I could be mistaken. Either he was or he wasn't. I can't remember all of them, but he's out of Minneapolis and used to work at Treasury, I believe, during the Obama administration, and really helped bail us out during the global financial crisis. He was just talking about, when the Fed looks at the 10-year, what do they look at? And they said 40% of it is inflation, which he said we're meaningfully going to 2%, which I think we all, agree, especially the comps that are coming up on PCE and CPI the next couple months. And then he said the rest of it is kind of made up of like term premium, which is our government going to spend a lot of money? And so a really big shoe to drop coming up here, which obviously that quarterly refunding was part of term premium, which you saw the long end of the curve, 30-year bond come down. It's huge. But there's a continuing resolution next month on March 15th. So are they going to pass a budget? Are there going to be tax cuts? Will DOGE actually do anything that cuts spending? So, that's my 2 minutes dump of all things technical and cap markets. And the bottom line is, like, I think, although there's a lot of like kind of political noise and distortion out there, but I think everyone universally wants lower rates, no matter whether you're liberal or conservative. It's interesting to see all the takes out there. People seem to be fighting the fight against the 10-year and lower rates. I can't wrap my head around it. I want lower rates. That's it. I yield the floor.
Me too.
Well, I will say that I was just checking the wire to see what had come out, if there's any news that we should be aware of. And our friend, the Treasury Secretary, actually, there was an article that just popped up that came out and said, concerning interest rates and the GSEs. And he said that we'll determine when we release the GSEs into the wild based on the impact it's going to have to interest rates, which is a really encouraging thing to hear, because I know we have talked about in this forum, as well as the conversation in many other forums, that there is a worry. What happens when they get released into the wild? And do we see a rise in interest rates because of that? What's the influence? And it looks like he's well aware that that's going to be a possibility. And he's taking that into account as he thinks about what the next steps are. Other good news is Scott Turner has been confirmed by the Senate and has been sworn in. So we now have a partner in that role.
Yep. I've had a very, I don't know, maybe jaded view of releasing the GSEs into the wild. I've never wanted to do it because when COVID happened, seems like forever ago, but it's, really just 5 years ago about this time, we started hearing all the rumblings. Private capital did not step up. They did not have them. They did not have well, let me say this. To be fair, they didn't have enough money to stand up our industry. So what's going to change? I just, and I know we talk about like the explicit guarantee, and that's always there. It's in the charter, whether the GSEs are private, semi-private, or in conservatorship. But, when, I remember who we normally sell our loans to, everyone was like puckering up and going, man, we don't know. Like, we got to cover T&I payments. We got to cover people going into forbearance. We don't have enough money to service our own servicing book, so we can't take on your new servicing PRMG. So we just, thank God we had the cash. We just floated our own servicing book when it turned out to be obviously a huge windfall for all of us that did that. But, the GSEs don't play in that space. Now, obviously FHFA did some great things, as it relates to, what you're responsible for, principal, interest, tax, and insurance. But that comes with the government backing it up. And if I could understand more fully how a private GSE landscape would look, where I know when the next contagion or pandemic or global war or whatever that rocks our country, what's going to happen then? I mean, do I have to hope and pray? I mean, and so it was a little messy, but the GSEs being in conservatorship was the rock of this industry. And it's hard to think of a landscape where there's just as solid a footing if they're privatized.
And relatively speaking, we were able to react pretty quickly and put some things in place, right? I mean, I know it was rocky for several weeks, but absent, if you had a bunch of private entities, they would never come together that fast with a resolution that would work, at scale. So I kind of lean your way, KP, where, is there like a hybrid approach at some point, right? Where we have the guardrails that we need and the backstop that we need and the kind of centralized, one throat to choke, so to speak, versus, a bunch of different competing entities from a private perspective.
And maybe Christy, this is kind of a question, what will the private sector do that Fannie and Freddie are not doing? I mean, I love those companies. I love those groups, Fannie and Freddie. They do a great job, and I know things, move, at a certain pace, but that's because when they make changes, they don't like to make changes like temporary, like, oh, hey, flash special in the month of February, Valentine's Day pricing special. I mean, they don't operate like that. It's like, hey, we're changing all the forms for every single appraisal and collateral, which at the end of the day, I mean, we buy and sell money with the home and land as collateral. They're changing all these forms. It's a very methodical process. And, Jake Williamson, over at Fannie Mae, they do such a great job of thinking through this process. It's a sea change. And so, like, what does the private sector add to that? I mean, and let me just throw on like a little conspiracy hat, and I'll toss the mic over to you, Chrissy. But I kind of don't mind Treasury having billions of dollars to be able to sweep whenever they want to fund things, if they need to. I mean, if there's $250-300 billion sitting in, the public coffers, I'm okay with that. Are we going to hand that to the private sector to do what? Like to raise the stock prices of the private companies? I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly what the private sector, because I understand the extreme libertarian view, which is, hey, government shouldn't be involved. Well, too bad we're involved. And I think there's probably about 20 other departments that should be focused on, other than everyone's rock solid foundation of their balance sheet is their house.
Kevin, you bring up a couple of really good points, and think about where we are today compared to where we were when the GSEs went into conservatorship. Where the market was completely different. The PLS market was completely different. It has not rebounded to the same levels that it was prior to the financial crisis. And so if we were setting the structure up from the beginning, would we want government to be less involved? Libertarian or not, I think most people would say yes. We want the government to be less involved. This should be something that more happens on the private side. However, that we're not setting it up from scratch. we have entities that are quasi-government agencies for all practical purposes while they're in conservatorship. They have made the benefit of home ownership even better when you look at us compared to other countries. Look at the rate of home ownership that we have. Look at the distribution from a demographic standpoint of home ownership that we have. It looks better here than it does in other countries. And you can't say that massively changing it won't have some kind of an impact. Absolutely, it will. Look at Jenny and the fact that it is a government agency that actually contributes back to the government so that we can have less taxes. If we think about where we want our government to go in the future, and I can only speak for myself, but I'd like to pay fewer taxes. I think most people would like to pay fewer taxes. And we're not talking about your fair share or any of that, but if you look at your monthly outgo, it'd be nice to have a few extra bucks of disposable income. I think most people can agree with that. And if keeping the housing market solid and allowing this to happen, provided we can get some government spending in control and under control, which, again, not to get political with who's doing what and whether or not they should be doing it or have the right to do it, different conversation. But I would like to see us continue to look at ways we can lower taxes, look at ways we can benefit the average American, and make sure that we continue to preserve homeownership and the ability to obtain it.
All right. Now we had another interesting development this week, right? With another regulator. And I think this all kind of ties together when you think about the sometimes you need to be careful what you wish for. What are your guys' thoughts on, if the CFPB ends up not being the CFPB, where do you guys shake out on kind of, the regulatory burden getting potentially pushed back down to the state level? And KP, for you guys especially, being a multi-state lender, you already answer to more regulators than most banks and credit unions do. So I'm just curious, kind of, what your thoughts are on the other shoe to fall. Should we not have a CFPB?
Well, I mean, it's just like tariff talk to me. I mean, all the talking points out there are just it's like you could just, if you know where someone philosophically aligns, you know what they're going to say, and they all say the same thing. I swear to God. The CFPB does good. I think we all agree, and so, the talking points are, if they go away or if they're, quote, deleted, as Elon Musk has said, which, by the way, takes an act of Congress, totally not going to happen. So we all know that, right? They could have less funding. Will the states come in? Well, I mean, we're in California, so we already, we're already in a tough, regulatory environment for business as is. Although I will say that the Department of Financial, Services in most of the states, including, I would say, California, are like, if you do right as a lender or as by consumers, I mean, I think you're in a good spot. So, I don't really fear for our company from states coming after us. We have to report to states anyway, right? And so I'm not worried about that. I don't think anyone wants like the, like the Wild West. And it's so funny. It's like, well, if the CFPB is gone, suddenly all these bad actors come out and there's no one to get them. Like, come on, like,
right.
It's so funny. All these talking points are so weird. Having said that, what I think is actually going on is exactly what went on in the very first administration, which I reported on this a few weeks ago on my LinkedIn video, because I was reading in Kate Berry's article about what Trump 1 administration did. They put an acting CFPB director in there, Mick Mulvaney, and they can be an acting director for 210 days. When that is up, they can put another acting director in there for 210 days, or they could put someone in. Well, last time they put in Kathy Kraninger. And they still busted bad actors under the first Trump administration. I will say, thankfully, there wasn't a lot going on in our industry, because I would say generally our industry is filled with pretty good actors. And so I think the same thing's playing out here. I love that instead of the first time around, Mick Mulvaney, who was, OMB and chief of staff, we've got our Treasury Secretary, which is focused on the 10-year Treasury and just had this huge quarterly refunding announcement, which made the bond market go super happy. The Treasury Secretary is the acting director of the CFPB. And they're doing what any business owner would do. Hey, you know what? Let's take a pause. I need to inspect what I expect, which is still a line from Chris Sorensen, our retail channel director. And I see what's going on here. And I think that's what they're doing. So let them do it. It's like, we're not even done with 3 weeks. It's just like, people have so much time. It's so funny. There are people that like are supposedly analysts, and then they're just espousing all these talking points out there and fear mongering. And I'm like, analysis requires you to look at math, science, data, and facts. And, I love people who look at charts and talk about charts. And I love people who say, this is what they did the first administration. If they did something similar, right? It's a waste of emotional capital and energy. And honestly, like at 48, I just feel like I don't have time for it. So let's just stick to the facts. Week 3 is not even over. I can't wait to see what happens with the CFPB.
That pretty much covers the gamut there, Kevin.
Yeah. I was trying to give you cover as a fiduciary and a credit union. So, as an IMB, I have a little more leeway to speak freely. And of course, I'm only speaking for myself. I know, there are many others. Even my own partners have differing views. Some, further to the right and further to the left of me. I like to call it like I see it. So, Christy, I'll give you cover. UFCU is off the hook. By the way, I love your credit union. Just saying.
I was just going to say, the opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent those of KPMG, Rob and Robbie Chrisman, the Chrisman Commentary, FinLocker, or UFCU. They are the opinions, in fact, of only the people here speaking them. But maybe somebody in compliance will hire me. When I think about the CFPB going away, I think that it looks a little different than, it seems like people come at it from this all or nothing approach, that it's a zero-sum game of either the CFPB exists the way it does today, or it exists not at all the way it used to not exist at all. But the fact is, the regulations, the vast majority of the regulations that the CFPB enforces and looks out for consumers were already being done. They were just consolidated into one agency. So my questions come around, is the agency, should it be a standalone? Should it live under another department and have some more guidance and oversight? Should it be regulated differently in terms of how they interact? I don't think it goes away entirely. And again, those regulations didn't magically just happen because of the CFPB. They were always in existence. We still had to look at RESPA. I mean, RESPA's been around longer than the CFPB. They just happen to be one of the things that they do is enforce it. UDAP, the list goes on and on. And so how do we want that to be done, I think is the question, versus does the CFPB exist or not? Though those are not as sensational headlines and don't sell as many newspapers. So we'll continue to probably see those headlines, but we've got to get the emotion out of it. And then we have to start talking about what are the facts that really matter and what things are likely to change and where do we need to have advocacy and impact. So let that be my sales pitch for getting involved with the national MBA, your local MBAs, going to the advocacy days that these and other groups put on, because it really does matter that you go and you educate the lawmakers wherever you are, nationally, locally, at the state level, because they will make decisions that will impact us. And we need to be a part of that.
And can I just say, I want to give the Chrisman commentary a lot of love here, because you said something, the first paragraph, Rob himself, he's part of that. Robbie is part of the cap markets. I feel like, it's like a fact sheet. You're just reading this fact sheet every morning, and yeah, there are some topics that are political, but the way that it is written, it makes you think. And I don't feel like it makes you think of, multiple angles, like an attorney would, that is looking at something from all angles. How would I, if I'm representing the plaintiff, but how would I act if I were representing the defendant, and then vice versa? And to your point about the all or nothing thing, I I like to take little veiled shots at people when I'm challenging them in their thinking. I call that binary thinking. You know, you can tell when people have binary thoughts because they're so politicized in everything they say one way or the other. And it's just not healthy for discussion. If you don't know both extremes of every talking point, you know, you're still gathering information. But the reality is where we live, especially as owner operators of businesses, we live in the gray every day. And binary thinking has no place there. You know, there are times when some decisions are obvious to make, one or the other. But when you're thinking about things, you know, I'll give you an example. So like the PPP funds, right? You know, the binary thought was like, you know, well, we're not taking it, we're patriots, or we're taking it because, the government's giving us money, or some people are like, hey, we need to survive, right? We deliberated it at our company, and we ultimately decided not to take the funds because in 2020 and 2021, our industries were doing well. And so we felt we ran a good business. Now people are being lined up to be sued by blood-sucking attorneys under the False Claims Act that took PPP funds. And so, you know, so my point is like thinking through things with math, science, data, and facts, which come out every day, is so much better than, you know, espousing binary thoughts that, you know, one way or the other. I love the thought-provoking paragraphs and write-ups in the Chrisman blog every day because I don't feel that it is a media that is slanted extremely one way or the other, liberal or conservative. And I think that's where we need to continue these conversations, especially now when people are so triggered.
Right. You know, I'll add to your the comment on the original writing. I know people probably question whether, you know, that's really written by Rob Chrisman. I can attest, and I think you guys have probably seen this as well, on at least 5 occasions, you know, out traveling, because the guy travels all over the place.
He's the beast.
He's on his laptop, cranking it out. In fact, last summer, I think it was in mid-August, in the middle of Lake Michigan on Owen Lee's boat, which was pretty nice, by the way. I'm like, what is Rob doing? He's over there in the corner while Bob Brokesmith is swimming laps around the boat in the lake. And it was Lake Charlevoix, not Lake Michigan, on Lake Charlevoix. And there's Rob cranking out the next day's paragraph. So those are his fingers, you know, magically typing out those words every day. And it's been decades of this email coming out. So I think the three of us I know we share how fortunate we feel to be kind of partners with them on this weekly recap show.
If he were listening at this moment, he would be texting Robbie to shut the show down because we've already talked too much about him. He deflects compliments like a pro. Like he'd be like, yeah, he just moves along. But
so I'll give you balance then, because if he's watching right now, he's probably watching last week's show because he can never click the right frickin' link.
I will say we had Rob and Robbie come out to talk to our sales team for our sales rally that we had a couple of weeks ago. And they did such a fabulous job. I actually got up there to share some love with them and talk about just how much I learned from them over the years. Like, I have been a reader of Rob's daily newsletter 6 days a week for decades, right? Like literally decades. I've learned from this man who I didn't have a personal relationship with in the beginning. And I know many of his readers don't, though you feel like you get to know him as you're reading it. And to now have a personal relationship with arguably a giant in the industry who has impacted so many people, but to your point, continues to stay current on every single thing that's going on and approaches it with grace and a lot of humor. It's a little dry humor, but there's a lot of humor in there, which is what's needed when we're dealing with some of the challenging topics that we deal with. Because it is up to us as an industry to wrestle to the ground some of these things and then be able to go and advocate for what is going to protect the consumers and what is going to continue to keep a thriving housing industry. And that is something that I know each of you on this show take very seriously. We show up. It's not just about the day job and, you know, making a paycheck. It's really about creating that positive impact in the. We're lucky to have folks like Rob and Robbie who do the work that they do so that we can continue to do the work that we do.
Well, long live the Chrismans and Myrtle.
Right on. Well, guys, we have made it to another bottom of the hour. Maybe, just maybe by next week, we'll have some new intro, outro, kind of spice this thing up. So for those of you still hanging around, if you have any suggestions or requests for theme music, put them in the chat. We'll consider it.
BB, are you making it to industry conference next week or Hurt No More?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Christy, are you on this Hurt No More train?
I am. I have a conflict, so Mike Jones will be representing the fine folks at UFCU at Hurt No More.
Nice. I'm
Don't give them too much tequila.
Yeah, TMC is having their nice advisory board meeting and Hurt No More. It's going to be a great week, so hopefully I'll see y'all out there.
I'm going to have some FOMO, but have a good time.
Videos. We need videos. We need 2 KP videos from the from Utah.
Well, I'll be doing the show from Deer Valley next week.
If anybody's headed to Southern Secondary next week in Houston for the TMBA, hit me up. I know the three of us, I saw both of you at IMB. We didn't get a photo, all three of us together. That just did not work out. Jody was there too, and we still didn't get the four of us in the same spot at the same time.
Photo, we're on film every week. I had a cigar with air. What else do you need?
Oh, come on, that was good. We needed the photo. So we'll get that next time. But any of our listeners, if you are out there at Southern Secondary, hit me up. Let's make a video together. Let's get a photo and get that shared out on LinkedIn.
All right, y'all. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday on The Last Word. Peace.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.